Hi, everyone. This is Camilla. It's great seeing you all. Welcome to TRU's weekly community gathering every Friday. This particular session is called Tips for Early Career Artists Getting Your Work Out There and Getting Noticed. And it's hosted by YPAC, which stands for Young Professionals and Artists Circle, a division of TRU for theater professionals in their 20s and 30s to connect, create community, support each other's work, and grow together as we develop our careers. And so I'll start by introducing myself. My name is Camilla. I work in business development with Aurie Consulting, a boutique communications firm, and my background's in producing for all kinds of theater and outreach initiatives for different shows on Broadway, off Broadway, in London, on the West End. And I love TRU. I'm very happy to be here presenting today. And then Jordan is here. He's an actor, writer, director. He does it all. And then we're very lucky to have Mêlisa, an award-winning Welsh playwright, director, and adjunct professor at NYU Tisch. Her work has been developed and presented by BMG Music, the New School, Wales Millennium Centre, Playwrights Horizons, Primary Stages, and much more. She will discuss her career trajectory, sharing how she gained recognition, and securing productions with leading American theater companies. And she'll also explore the role academia plays in building a successful career in theater, and share some advice for early career professionals. So our next step in today's itinerary is Jordan will have a conversation with Mêlisa, with all of you listening. And if you think of any questions, please drop them in the chat and I will keep track. And at the end of the conversation, so closer to the end of the hour, I'll join back in and moderate a Q&A with any questions from our listeners. And so without further ado, I'm going to pass off the mic to Jordan and he'll take it.
Thank you so much for that, Camilla. Hi, Mêlisa. Before we start, I just want to also clarify what our intent is with YPAC and this specific gathering. This is purely for advice to young writers. We're trying to get this to be, we're trying to record this so that we have it as a resource for young writers to come and look at and watch whenever. So just to clarify on what Jay was saying earlier. Before we get to, thank you for that. Okay. Before we get to the first question here and give Mêlisa a chance to introduce herself, I would love to mention how I know Mêlisa, how I met Mêlisa, why I think she was a perfect person to come in and speak for us. I was recently, a couple of years ago, part of doing an audition at a panel at a company called One-on-One NYC. And Mêlisa was featured on that panel as a playwright who works with actors, new actors a lot. And I chose to do a short script that I wrote. And there was one line in there that really got her to laugh. And she was kind enough to give me her email and asked to stay in touch. And since then, I've booked jobs because of her. At her recommendation of my name, I've gotten very lucky enough to work on her words on my favorite play of hers that I still haven't gotten to read the full script of. But gosh, it's so funny. So that's how I know. And I just know as a young playwright, it's very, very important and essential to just see somebody who gets it, to get what you're doing. As cheesy as it is, I feel like Mêlisa is one of those people for me. So without further ado, I would love if Mêlisa, you could introduce yourself a little bit and talk about a little bit about where you come from. I know that you're Welsh born and it does permeate into your work sometimes. So I would love to hear about that as well. And yeah, I would also, as you're going, whatever got you into writing initially, if that comes up, that'd be great.
Yeah. Hi, Jordan. It's so good to see you. And I have to say, it's so nice to be in this room with so many lovely people. We just had a little introduction session with the listeners and the people in the room. And it was so wonderful to be in a room full of artists. So good on you, TRU. It's wonderful. Yes, gosh, I'm also glad that you clarified that I'm a year or so over 40. So thank you. I didn't want anyone to.
Yeah, that was our miscommunication error with Jay. Sorry about
that. My lines, they give me away. Anyway, my name is Mêlisa. Hello there. I am a playwright. I'm a director. I'm a producer. I like to basically say that I'm a shepherd of stories. The way that, gosh, where to begin? Where do I begin? I'm from Wales originally. I'm from Cardiff, which is the capital city of Wales, and I'm a fluent Welsh speaker. And in Wales, theatre arts and the arts in general are a big, big part of our culture. We have something called the Eisteddfod. So I think it was somebody, Catherine in the room earlier, said that she'd been in the business since she was 5. Well, I too have been working on plays, in plays, reading poetry and all of that sort of thing since I was a toddler, as we all do in Wales. So it seems that storytelling has always been in my cultural blood, as it were. And the other side of my family are from Brazil. And so there's a lot of exuberance and spectacle from that side of the family. So I think those two things together have made me who I am today. I say that I'm a shepherd of stories in many ways because I've never really liked being one thing. I started my career, my professional career as an actor. I was in a soap opera as a young woman. And before then I was in films as a child. My father was a film director, my mother's an actress. So it was a very natural place for me to put myself, was on screen or on stage. And I did my first national tour when I was 12. So I sort of fell into acting, and then as life went on, I fell into all the other things that I did. So I like to think of myself as a multi-hyphenate storyteller, really, more than anything else. I also teach. I teach at NYU at Tisch at the Department of Dramatic Writing, which Jordan was kind enough to come and help my students in their directing class, which I was very grateful about. Thank you, Jordan. Because I teach directing for writers, because I'm a strong believer and a firm believer that writers actually need to have a lot more of a voice in the rehearsal room. I think it's a big mistake, this culture that we have, that the writer needs to stay silent and that the director knows best. So I'm very, very pro collaborating as artists across the board. And so that's why I love teaching directing for playwrights. And I teach craft and introduction to playwriting and all of that sort of good stuff. And I also work for Primary Stages, an off-Broadway theatre company in New York City, where I work with their school, the Einhorn School of Performing Arts, where I teach basically people who already have plays under their belts, and all that sort of stuff. So I help them in workshop, and I lead a lot of workshops. So that's kind of what I do. I can dive into more details about my producing and things like that if you like. But yes, I do a little bit of everything. In terms of producing, I would say that the majority of the work producing I've done has been theatre, but with a twist. And we can talk about that afterwards if you like. But I hope that tells you a little bit about who I am.
That tells us so much. Thank you for that. Honestly, personally, I actually have a question for you just as a writer, because I've also read some of your work and I got to see that really amazing play at the, I always forget theaters, where is it?
Theatre Row.
Yes,
Theatre
Row. And it was like very unique. It was very avant-garde in a sense, but it was mixed with modern language. So and it was like a very interesting look at a different angle of feminism that I've never seen on stage. It was just that was the most, I was constantly like, it felt like a thread of a needle of a mystery going on the whole time. And I find that as a constant thread in your work, or a theme in your work across other things that I've read. So I'm curious about and I wonder if this ties into the Welsh culture at all, but where your personal taste for your kind of writing comes from, your kind of style, I should say.
Yeah, thank you so much, Jordan. That was the inheritance of a long-term fault. It was a commission by a feminist theatre company called Clutch Productions, and anybody who identifies as a woman in this room or watching should actually look them up. They work in film as well, but they do some really great development work. They particularly develop a lot of work for women over 50, and then they produce work by people who identify as women in general. So it was through Clutch, it was a commission. And the conversation that we had was, who are we as women in the past, and who will we be in the future? And so I started pondering that question, and And I started thinking about who and why we as women behave the way we do in business and in academia and in science and all that sort of thing. So anyway, so started, plucking at the brain and what have you. And I do tend to bring a lot of myself, and well, everyone does, but I bring a lot of my Welsh culture into my work. And so this play was actually, it was almost like two plays woven into one. There was an old world play, which was almost like, what if a woman had never seen man? And it was an indigenous culture of these two women who had never come across a man before. And then that was sliced together with a woman who was very ambitious in academia and science, who was trying to do the very, sorry to be so gendered, but masculine thing of the trajectory of ambition, and how, of course, within her life, her body, her baby making skills, all of that stuff gets in the way, and how actually it was essentially a play about colonization of language, of people, and ultimately in modern day of body. So it was, for me, it was a very personal play. I brought a lot of myself into that play. And it just came from a place of questioning, who would we be had the Norman conquest never happened? Who would we be had the Romans never arrived? Who would we be if we were just women on a land? Would we still have this capitalist idea of achievement, or would it be more community-based and communal? And ultimately what we discover is that, we don't know, but what we see in this examination of it is that man destroys because man wants. And I'm not trying to say that all men are bad, but in this play, that's how it sort of ended up.
I wanted to actually, because I'm remembering more of the play as you're talking about it. You did this beautiful thing where to kind of encapsulate that idea of man coveting, where, and correct me if I'm wrong on the details here, but I believe the women in that old world section of the play were speaking another language, and then when the man comes in, he's speaking English and is present, and then slowly, the more times we check in throughout, the younger, more impressionable woman ends up kind of adapting to his language and starts speaking in a way that the general audience.
Exactly. And there's a moment in the first scene where the older woman has a premonition, and she says that we'll be walking along these hills and we will have no tongue. And of course, we think, what does that mean? And by the end of the play, they have lost their language. And actually, with that play, I'm working on it at the moment because the play is meant to be multilingual because I speak Welsh. So the old world is actually in Welsh. And the new world is in English, though in the production that you saw, that we had an English version of both worlds. But I'm currently trying to work with a couple of indigenous communities across the country to adapt it to their language and to their storytelling forms, so that that can continue its life in a community setting across the country with other indigenous cultures. So my hope is that the play can live on with the American English intact, and that the old world can always be adapted.
Yeah, I actually kind of want to highlight that as a point, because that was a lesson that I learned a little while back about, you want to write something that, that the Welsh culture was important to you, and about the language changing over time, but you can later down the road sub in any category for that, and it is a timeless metaphor, and it's a brilliant stage device that you've written in that can be, and it makes it producible. It makes it producible in the future for when there's other revolts about different cultural things that are going on and people need to make a statement. So I know that I incorporated that onto the big projects that I'm working on now. But anyway, let's get, I went a little bit off rails here. I would love to, if you wouldn't mind, stepping back to when you were an early playwright, and if there's any highlights about maybe you notice how the landscape has changed from then to today, but if you were in your early 20s to what was like your first couple of steps into getting your first three things produced? Obviously there's a couple of readings in living rooms with friends and stuff like that, but how do you start to progress to a level where there's money behind it, is I guess what a lot of people are curious.
Yeah, I think that everyone's journey is different and there isn't one way of doing it. And I just want to say that in an effort to, because I sometimes think that people think that there's only one way, and there isn't. And there shouldn't be, because that's what makes life so boring. But I actually came to playwriting quite accidentally. I moved to New York when I was 22 years old. I'd left a theatre company. I was working with the National Theatre of Wales, doing a show, touring, and then I came here because I fell in love with a man and did the whole thing that that we do when we're young, and I really didn't know what I wanted to do. But what I did know is that I was not, I didn't have the fire in my belly enough to be an actor. Because I was meeting all of these actors in New York City, and I realized everybody here is working really hard, and I wasn't used to that. And so I had to really mind myself into, well, what am I willing to work hard at doing? And the thing that I knew about myself is that I loved actors. I think actors are sent to us from heaven, because you make the world a better place for writers, for directors, and for the world in general. And I think that I just knew that about myself. So I first started directing in the city. And I started finding small theatre festivals and small theatre communities that would essentially allow me to put on a piece of a play or a piece of a new work. And actually, that's how I got into new work, because it was doing pieces of Eugene O'Neill or pieces of Clifford Odets. And then people would say, well, do you want to do my piece? And then I would ask the producers, could I come in and do something new? And then I started working with new writers. And so that was my first year and a half in New York City while, bartending and doing the other things that you do here. And then I started realizing, well, because I keep wanting to, I hate to say it, but at the time I was younger, I wanted to change everyone's work all the time. So I started thinking, well, maybe I'm a writer. Maybe that's something I should be doing. So I remember sitting down one day and thinking, okay, Mêlisa, let's see what you got. And I sat down for 3 days and I wrote a play. And it was a full-length play. It was about 95 pages. I still have it in my drawer, and I still go back to it and tinker with it every now and then, because I weirdly still love it. I think it's my first passion play. And I remember I was working at a bar called The Cutting Room at the time, and everybody there was an actor. And I asked them if they would come in a couple of hours early to read it with me. So we all read it together. And that's when I realized, oh, this is what I want to do. I want to be in community with actors. I want to make something. And I want to feel challenged to make something better. And I loved that feeling. So anyway, so fast forward. I wrote a few things. I actually then found, and I continued directing. So my directing took off before my writing took off. I worked with I worked with a wonderful company called the Rebellious Subjects. They were a crew that came out of NYU. They were all about 24 years old. And we just put Shakespeare up in parks, in parking lots, in anywhere we could. So we just did a lot of that sort of stuff. And then we modernized things as well. So there was an element of writing in that as well. But after a few years of doing that, I took a class at primary stages at ESPA, where I now teach. And it was life-changing. It actually changed my life, because I had never been in a playwriting group before. And I had never been shepherded by a professional writer before. So my first class was with a director named Michelle Bossy. And she helped me birth my play Pit, that later that year, actually. So Pit is a play about coal miners. It's a coal mining strike in Wales during the Thatcher regime. And she really championed my play, and she encouraged me to do exactly what you're doing here today, to get into rooms. It was a rehearsal room at the time with other writers, other actors, and we used to call it the primary stages jam. And we would take 20 pages and just jam with them. And that's where I met my first ever director and my first producer. And they said, let's do this. Of course, I was like, yes, let's do it. And Jeff Woodbridge and Molly, they picked up the play. They raised the money and they produced it at Theatre for the New City. And we had a lovely run at Theatre for the New City, and it went really well and we got good reviews. And then I had the bug. So then I continued writing and I continued taking more workshop classes. And after, I'd say, 2 years of continuing this journey I worked with Winter Miller, Stephanie Zadravec, Andrew Lindsay, who became a big mentor of mine, just working with really great people in these rooms. And one day, Primary Stages came up to me and said, well, listen, we're doing this MFA program with Fordham, and there's a scholarship attached to it. Would you like to get an MFA? And I was like, an MF what? And they offered me a scholarship to do an MFA in playwriting. So I actually got my MFA through primary stages, through taking those workshop classes and going through that sort of just getting to know the theatre company, right? I would volunteer at their galas and show up to their readings and do the stage directions. And just by getting to know them, they obviously believed in my work and believed in me. And so I was lucky enough to go into that program, which was amazing because there were only two of us. And so there were two each year, and we all became fast family. And that was sort of my journey. It really was just taking classes, being in community, and always just saying yes, yes, yes.
Yeah. That's actually a perfect segue, because I was going to I was going to lead to this next question about wondering how much modern academia is worth it for a playwright, especially maybe a financially struggling playwright as well. Like, I was wondering what the practical benefits of attending an MFA today are, and whether or not it is truly helpful in offsetting versus, opportunities that you can make for yourself out in the field anyway. So if you had any more thoughts on that, but you did kind of touch on that.
Yeah, I mean, I have many thoughts on that. Hopefully some that won't get me fired from NYU. No. No, it's different for everybody, right? I think for me, I realize that I'm somebody who needs to constantly learn and be challenged. And so taking classes was always a great way for me to do that. On the question of whether one should go and get an MFA in playwriting or not, I would say, I'll tell you what it did for me, and then you can make up your own mind. It gave me a confidence that I didn't have beforehand. And the confidence isn't in the qualification, actually. The confidence is in the rigorous learning. I had some great teachers, I had Kuzi Cram, I had Morgan Jeunesse, we had Len Jenkin, we had some really Josh Hecht, great people. And there was a rigor in our program. And I think that partly came from the fact that there were only two of us in each year. So they tailor-made in many ways the program for our needs as playwrights. And my fellow playwright, Matthew Capdicasa, who was in the program with me, who's wonderful, great playwright. You'd love his plays, Jordan. You should check out his work.
Name one more time so I can write it down.
Matthew Capdicasa. I'll message it to you as well. He's great. What was great is that he and I were incredibly different playwrights. You couldn't get more different. So this thing that can sometimes happen in academia where everyone's ending up trying to sound the same or competing with each other didn't happen with us. And I think that's the beauty of small programs. And so I really recommend, if you are thinking of doing an MFA in playwriting, really consider the place and the community you want to build, because that's the thing that being in a structured academic setting gives you as well, is community. And I keep coming back to this word, and I don't mean it to sound like a cliche, but if you don't build these places of community like you're doing here, there are no jobs. Because every single job I've been given in my life has been given to me by a friend. I've never been given a job by a random stranger. It's never happened. And I don't think it does happen. So that's why I think, yes, go and pursue an MFA if that's something that will give you confidence. And if you're lacking community that you think that program can give you. Otherwise, take classes, go to places like this, meet people, go and do readings, go to readings, and build your community that way, because because one of you is always going to rise before the other, and what you want is to constantly pull your collaborators up with you. And that's what I've done, that's what I continue to do, and that's what most of my friends along the way have done.
Yeah, I agree. I've also ended up in the majority of my jobs have been because I've been in the right room at the right time to just say, hey, I'll do that if you're looking for people. And that's how I've made all of my money in the city.
Yeah. And I just want to say, Jordan, just sort of in regards to the way that we've gotten to know each other, the thing that you did that nobody else did that day was that you, when you were doing the panel for all of us, is that you didn't just follow up, you consistently followed up. And I don't mean like pestering, that's not the thing, right? But you were always sort of telling me what was going on with you, and you were always letting me know that you knew what was going on with me. And so that made me feel like, okay, let's be in community together. Because oftentimes people think that we remember everyone when we meet them right away, and we don't. And it's important to continue those relationships. It's not a nuisance, and it's not a lie when people say that you have to hear a name 5 times before you remember it. It's true, because we're so overwhelmed in this city. So just a testament to your tenacity, Jordan, and to say to others here, as writers, as directors, as producers, as actors, continue reaching out to people, because it's really important.
To be totally fair, part of that came from that you recognized my work as well, but the majority of that was at that same night after the panel. I went home and looked you up on New Play Exchange, and you have several of your plays available to read. And what is the one with I never remember the name, but the one that I came in and workshopped with you.
Oh, George Bell, which I still haven't finished.
Oh, so good. When I read that, I was like, I need to get to know her, please. Like, anyway, she's so talented. So, gosh,
the hardest thing about being a writer, and I'm sure the playwrights in the room will identify with this, is finishing the bloomin' work. It's just because unless you have that sort of deadline of a production, it's just it's a tough one. We all suffer from it on all levels.
Yeah, that is actually a perfect segue, because I was going to ask this for my own. I'm working on a musical, and I have been struggling to. I've known how the story finishes, but I just cannot finish it. It seems. But I was very curious. Okay, so fast forward a little bit more into your career, and I'm curious about how specifically. I'm curious about the King's Wife. Mm-hmm. And I would love to hear a very detailed, kind of a step-by-step process from the playwright's perspective about what is expected of them at every stage. How do you end up taking this show that I know that you're working on with Jamie Floyd, which I don't know if we performed together on stage one time, me and Jamie Floyd. I don't know if I ever told you that.
No.
I was an actor in a thing that she wrote the music for. It was called Little Christmas Miracles at
Oh my gosh, yes. I think I saw that.
Well, I joined halfway through. I replaced somebody, so I don't know when you saw it, but I was on stage singing with Jamie Floyd at the end for closing, so that was funny. Anyway, but I'm very curious about like how a relationship like that forms, and how how you guys can develop trust with each other alongside that development process as things start to get more serious, and Playwrights Horizons, this really huge company, starts to take notice and is producing it. And I'm wondering, at what point did they step in, if not from the beginning? And really quick, as just as an example from where I'm at, and I was part of a program called Across a Crowded Room at the Library for the Performing Arts, I believe. And it was so interesting. We got to the first stage, we made up a musical idea, and they loved my idea for the story. And then I just followed up, and I was like, we got one song written and we got a little bit in, and then I followed up and kept following up, and then no answers. And I was like, what happened? Why did the steam get lost? Where did the group fall apart? So I'm curious if that's a common thing as well, and how that might be avoidable.
Oh, it's very common. And it's, musicals are hard. That's the thing I've discovered. Musicals are really hard. I mean, our journey was quite unique because we were brought together. We're not a writing team as such. We were brought together by a producer. And a producer who liked my work. She saw my play Charlie's Waiting and a couple of other my plays. And she loved Jamie's work, because Jamie does a lot of work on television as well, composing for television. So she brought us together around an idea that she had herself. And so it was a commission to begin with. The story is the story of Catherine of Aragon, and how the smartest woman in the room doesn't always have the loudest voice when you're married to somebody like Henry VIII. And so that's the basis of the show. And we brought together, and it was tough because I'd already written the play of the script pretty much, but with titles of could this scene be a song? And could this moment be something else, you know? So that's where it started. And because Jamie's a very fast writer, she came in and just started like absorbing my scenes into her songs very, very quickly. So from the very beginning, we realized that even though we are completely different women, you couldn't get two more different people if you tried than she and I.
I was kind of surprised when I heard the combo. Yeah.
Oh my God, you couldn't get more different. But what we have in common is this passion for storytelling. And she's from the Nashville School of songwriting. So she's a very natural storyteller. So her songs and my book very easily kind of came together. So that was the beginning. And the producer actually, it was before COVID, the producer garnered some interest from Playwrights Horizons. And then, of course, COVID happened. 2 years happened, everything changed, the world changed, we changed. We changed, but the musical didn't change. And that was a problem, actually, because what happened was we thought that we were the same people coming back into this room, and we weren't. And so in hindsight, we weren't ready for that Playwrights Horizons reading at all, and it was a producer's backers reading. And if I could get my years back since then, I would definitely have done things very differently. But we were just so desperate to get into a room with people again. We were like, let's do it. So we did it. We saw the reading. We had an amazing cast. And then we realized that's not the show we want to tell anymore. That's not the play it needs to be. So we went away for a little while. We rewrote it. We reconstructed it. And then the producer started, Jennifer Krantz, started shopping it around again. And we've actually just come off a whirlwind of a year with it, because we went to the Adirondack Theatre Festival with it, where we sold out 4 days over there, which was great for a reading. Then we took it over to Paramount in Aurora, Illinois. I think I heard somebody from Chicago here. What a great community you have over there. So it was wonderful to work with Paramount. We worked with them. And then we just came off of 6 weeks of working in Indiana at Constellation Stage and Screen, where we had our first production of it. So all that to say, it's been a roller coaster. And one of the reasons that we've been able to keep it together is because we have a producer, essentially, I suppose, mastering the ship. And we also have a director, a wonderful director, in Tamala Woodard. She's currently the chair of acting at Yale. Tamala's got a great play about to open called Spunk. You should all check it out. But Tamala has also been a fantastic champion of the musical. So when you have two people who don't have community around them or don't have people around them, it's very easy for us to go our separate ways. I mean, I've worked on many projects where things have just fizzled out. And so what I've learned now, what I want to do moving forward, and what I try to do, is build my team as quickly as possible. So I've got my play or the musical. Now I want, okay, who else do we need in this? Because the more voices, actually, even though it's scary, the more accountability you have. And so my recommendation as you work on these things is not to gatekeep so much. I feel like a lot of writers tend to gatekeep their work, when actually what we need is to say, hey, here's a thing, it may not be ready yet. Who else wants to join the party? And sometimes you have to change those people in your party. Sometimes those people don't stick around. We've changed creative team several times in this show and in other musicals that I've worked on. But the truth is, if you're willing to be vulnerable and say, come and play in the sandbox, you're going to grow and you're going to continue with the journey. So that's what I would say, if that's helpful.
Yeah, no, it's perfectly helpful. And you brought up this thing that I want to talk about more, because this is something that I personally, at this stage in my writing career, have really struggled with. Because I wanted to talk about it earlier when you mentioned that your first play you still take out and you still tinker with it sometimes. And that's so fascinating to me, because I have a play, my very first play, I was fortunate enough, I had a really great playwriting professor at the University of Georgia, and he took my play and a couple other plays that some of the other students had written and published it in a book, because he had a grant and was like, I like these a lot and you guys are young writers and this is a technical publication for you. And he was a great teacher. But I always go back and I look at it and between that and my second play that I ever wrote, whenever I go back and read those, I go, oh, that's horrible. But then other moments, there are scenes where I go, whoa, that was incredibly insightful, and I don't think I'm at all the same person today that would be able to write this.
Yeah.
And I feel weird about that. So I feel weird about taking old stories and changing them with where I'm at today, because I don't feel like I'm the same person. And there's a part of me that feels like that's also what's going on with my musical as well. You know, I talked to you a little bit about it when we last saw each other in person.
Yeah, that's a hard one, because I think that the biggest mistake I think a playwright can make is continue to work on one piece forever. I've worked with so many playwrights who've had passion projects for 10, 15 years. And there's a difference between putting something in the drawer and tinkering with it and only working on the one play in perpetuity, right? And I think that the problem with that is when you're working on the same project all the time, you are constantly changing and you're not aware of how it's affecting your play. And so you lose the original impulse for why you wrote that play in the first place. And I think that why we romanticize our first plays and why we have a romantic relationship with our first plays is because we, at least in my life, there was less pressure back then, because I wasn't trying to sell something. I wasn't trying to impress anyone. I wasn't trying to, as your career sort of grows, there are bigger things that come into your mind. Whereas those first plays, there's a purity to them almost. It's impulsive, they're messy, but I love them. And that's why I keep going, the play I'm talking about in particular is about Strindberg, it's about August Strindberg. And I just keep going back to it because I'll never be able to work on it all the time. But I can find moments in it that I want to go back into, and it's delicious. So as long as I'm not changing the full structure of the play, and I'm just recognizing who I am today and what I've learned and what I can implement in that play, then I think it's okay. But I think if you get stuck in a play for a long time, it doesn't help you move on or grow.
Yeah, yeah, and I'm wondering as well, while we're still on this subject about first plays, sometimes my parallel thought on that is that I missed the days when I didn't know any of the rules of playwriting, and I didn't know what made a good play and a good tension of drama or whatever. And I sometimes I'll go back and read it and think, yeah, this is super messy, but I took huge swings that are interesting, that, you know, something that is avant-garde in certain rights. And I don't know if I'm if I am able to get out of my own head enough to do stuff like that again at this level, you know?
Yeah, you are, right? You are. And I think that that's the thing that I'm constantly trying to teach myself, is to get back into that headspace of write for me and not for anyone else. Because ultimately, and I say that being very conscious of the audience. I'm the type of writer because I direct too, I'm very, very conscious of my audience when I write. Not when I do my first draft, but I'm of the Simon Stevens school of playwriting, where I believe you vomit on the first draft and then you craft afterwards. The writing, the WRIGHT, to write something, to craft something. When I craft for my audience. But when I write, which I believe is my first draft, I write for me. And so that's what I try and bring myself back to all the time, is what do I want to write and how then do I craft it for the audience? And by doing that, it allows me to be a little bit less self-conscious about what is the structure of this? Oh my God, what is that? I also think, and this is my advice to every playwright, but it's particularly playwrights under 40, do not get seduced by Aristotle. All right. I know that we live in this world where Aristotle has this hold upon us, and rightly so, for many, many reasons. I teach Aristotle. I do a lot of work around Aristotle, but I'm very, very aware, or one of the things that I hope that I bring my students where I can, is that I try and absorb and read and watch as much international theatre as I can, because there are many methods of doing theatre, of creating theatre, and our very, very Aristotelian way of doing it, I believe, is becoming less and less interesting to audiences. That's actually the play that you saw. One of my goals was to break that form as much as I could. And I don't think I fully succeeded, but I continually try and think, well, what else is there? Because we don't all, our heartbeats aren't all the same. And so, and neither are our climaxes, quite frankly. And so, so I encourage all young writers, old writers, all writers, middle-aged writers like myself, to really explore international theatre and international theory. Theory is important. Get yourself a theory book. There's a playwriting theory book. Of course, I'm not in my home right now, so I don't have it in front of me, but I can send it to you if you want to post it into a chat at some point. That basically it runs the gamut of theatre theory, and I highly recommend reading as much as you can on theory. And the other thing, I'm so sorry, now that I'm on my tirade, I really think that all playwrights, every single playwright, needs to take an acting class. Because if you don't understand what it takes to be an actor, you don't have to be a good actor. I'm a terrible actor nowadays, but I still take acting classes where I can, because I need to remember what it is to build a scaffolding for actors and the choices that they make and the tactics that they choose. And if I'm unable to understand that, I can't infuse it into my play. And therefore I have no structure. I have an idea of structure, but I don't have real structure if I don't understand the actor's work that's coming up.
Yeah. I had a really great director who said something super similar. She said, she was one of my favorite directors I've ever worked with. And she said, everything I know about being a director came from being an actor.
Yeah.
And I feel the same way about being a writer as well. I think you have to know what you're asking people to do in certain moments. And
absolutely.
Yeah. I also wanted to equate that. It's a great quote about vomiting and then shaping afterwards. I have a one from Jordan Peele, who writes Us and a couple other horror movies. He always says he's just dumping a bunch of sand in a lot for the first draft, and then all their other drafts are turning it into a sandcastle.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's the thing, you know, especially if this is the thing I've seen with playwrights who write historical plays or things that are true stories. They get so stuck in the truth that they never finish the story. And actually storytelling, you know, plot and all that sort of, but storytelling itself is quite a skill set. And just knowing everything about something can be detrimental to story. And so, and I think Jordan Peele does this very well, because he takes, right? He learns, he absorbs, he takes, and then he recreates in many, many ways. And as we all do. And I think that anybody who's sort of in true storyland, I really, really urge you to write what you know first and then do the research and craft in the research, because if you don't, you're going to be stuck in, oh, is this true? When actually 95% of the time, what you make up will end up being the thing that you didn't know you knew, because we're all human beings and plays are about the human experience, not about facts.
Yeah, 100% agree with that. We have kind of a Jungian collective consciousness that I think comes across in theater very often. So we have about 15 minutes left. I would love to talk about a little bit because my end goal with this, when I get older, I want to go move to a college town and be a professor and teach writing and acting and direct a show every year or two. And so I'm very curious about what you would recommend for playwrights who do have that intention later down the road. What should they be doing now? Is it important to get a degree in education, for example? Or I'm also just interested in hearing about your experience of coming to, I know you worked at primary stages, you said, and then also how you ended up at NYU is very interesting to me.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to teach at a university, you have to get a graduate degree. So that is something you just have to do. I don't think you have to get anything in education. I mean, didn't have a clue how to teach until I actually taught. So I think that's the beauty of doing what we do, is that we're constantly learning as artists and we're constantly teaching each other as well. So just to say, yes, you need a graduate degree, but you don't need to know anything about education as such. Because hopefully you have a mentor in your program that will ease you in and all that. I did too, which was great. NYU, teaching at Tisch and teaching in the Department of Dramatic Writing is one of the joys of my life. I love teaching. It keeps me on my toes. It also allows me to learn from my students in a very profound way, not just about TikTok, but about like really understanding what they're interested in. Because I think if we only, the zeitgeist is all of us, right? If we only listen to what we want to listen to, we're not actually listening. And our job as writers is to keep our satellite dishes as open as possible. And I find that my students at NYU really help me do that in a really great way. I teach undergraduate students and I teach graduate students. And so those two are very different types of classes to teach. One wants to be challenged, the grad students want to be challenged, the undergraduates need to be nurtured. What the graduate students don't understand is that they need to be nurtured too, they're just rejecting it for the longest time. So you have to adapt yourself to do that. How I came about to working at NYU was Kuzi Kram, who was my grad school teacher when I went to grad school, actually asked me to come in and sub for a teacher. And so I came in to sub for a class called Drama Lab, which is essentially a laboratory for writers to experiment. And I did that. And then I just stayed. And then I gained more classes. And of course, the thing with academia is the more productions you get, or the more publications, and the more sort of the higher up in the levels you go, I suppose, whatever that means, this level system. But the more recognition, I suppose, you get, the more that they want you to stay and the more that they want you to teach. And so it is important to continue. I think that there's an idea that if you go into teaching, oh, that's it, you've got a teaching job. No, it's important to continue working. Because there's always another adjunct that wants to take your position. But if you're faculty, that's important too. And what's lovely about NYU is that they do have their sabbatical, and they really, really encourage the faculty to go out and continue with their own professional work.
Yeah, that's all really great. Thank you for that. Okay, so with our last few thoughts here, I was wondering if you could just, if you had an opportunity to talk to your 25-year-old self, and give them a little bit of advice about how they could, how you could end up being more productive, or give advice on where to go in their career as a playwright, what would you offer?
Whew. Okay.
Such a petty question.
I don't know. Okay, so let's think about this. I had a great time in my 20s. I partied so hard. And I worked really hard, and I bartended, and I met a lot of great people, and I wouldn't change a day of it, I must be honest. In terms of my work productivity, I think I was more productive back then than I am now in many ways, because I was always running on empty and always wanting to get out of my situation. So I was always like, how do I pay my rent? Okay, got that down. How do I have fun? Got that down. But how do I become a playwright? So I was constantly using all the time, the little bits of time that I had, to push that forward as much as I could. Whereas now, because I don't have to do the bartending and all that sort of stuff, that's not to say, I do still take on other jobs, as we all do. I take on writing jobs, radio writing jobs, all sorts of things. So I don't know, what would I change? Okay. Here's what I do know about myself. I think I would be much further along in my career today had I had less fun and gone to more readings and networked a bit more. I'm a very natural networker, but I tend to make friends very easily. So for example, my first assistant playwright job was with Teresa Rebeck. And it's because we made fast friends. Most of the, excuse me, I just swallowed a fly. Most of the like I'm working on a show with Christine Lottie right now on her one-woman show that we're about to workshop. That came from, meeting friends through friends again. So a part of my networking has always been going to the bar and making friends.
Yeah.
That's not for everyone. I've never been good at the let's work together thing. So I think be yourself and just don't regret anything. That's what I would say.
Oh, don't regret anything. I love that. Did you say you were assistant? Take your time. Did you say you were assistant playwright to Teresa Rebeck? Was that what production was that for?
Yeah. So I was her assistant on Oh God, many things. I was her assistant on Poor Behavior,
Mhm.
and that was a great experience because I'd never really been in a that level of a rehearsal in New York City. I had it home, but never here, and it was amazing. It was directed by Evan Cabinet, who obviously has gone on to do amazing things. We had a great cast, and Teresa sort of took me under her wing, and she allowed me to work with her on her show with Danny DeVito. I Want That Recently, and a few other things. I also produced a movie with her. We've worked together in numerous capacities since then, outside of that assistant role. But just being open to doing that really opened many, many doors to me. And I'm so grateful for her championing me for so many years. She really has been incredible. And that's what I mean by, the people who you're friends with are the most important, really. No, everyone knows when you're faking it, and everybody knows when you want something from them. I've never been good at that. But yeah, just be kind and be a good person, and people will open doors to you.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's pretty much everything that I had prepared for you. I wanted to thank you again so much for doing this.
Thank
And
you for having me. I'm sorry I ramble a bit, I'm afraid. It's my Welshness.
no, thank you so much. You covered all of these like extra questions that I had just in case. So, I would love to bring Camilla back, and then if we have any submitted questions from the audience, that would be awesome. Camilla, you here?
Um,
Oh, nice.
Hi. Thank you so much. I loved listening to the whole conversation. So many good points. And I was reading the chat, and it was great to see how much resonated with our listeners and our audience. It was so nice. Um, so I didn't see any questions in the chat, but I did see lots of talkative chatters. So I'd love to open the floor if anyone has anything they want to ask. We have a few more minutes.
Do we usually keep cameras on for questions, Jay, or is that not?
Cameras are on. I don't necessarily need to spotlight the people who are asking questions, but
Okay.
anyone who's asking a question, you can unmute, do your virtual hand raise, so we see who wants to ask a question. If you don't want to speak, by all means, you can put your question in the chat. We'll read it there. All right.
I see one question here. It says, any theory books you would recommend?
Oh my gosh, so many. I'm so sorry that I'm not at home right now because I would show you my bookshelf. I have, like Sarah does in the background of your books over there. I have hundreds and hundreds of books on theory. Let's think. McKindrick's book on screenwriting, I highly recommend. Theatre, I think it's just called Theatre Theory Around the World, is my favorite book that I dip in and out of all the time. Let's think, what else is on my bookshelf? I'm trying to go through it in my mind. What I can promise to do, if I may do this, Jay, I can perhaps, or to Jordan or Camilla, I can perhaps email you a little list that you can send to your mailing list of recommended books, or something like that.
We would be more than happy for you to email us. I will put my email address in the chat. Please copy it and email me what you got, and we'll send it.
Great. I'll be home on Monday, so I will give you a long list. I don't even have my syllabus in front of me right now, otherwise I'd give you that. But yes, theory, just like absorb, absorb, absorb. And I think the other thing that I think that we don't do enough of as theater writers is read short stories. I think reading short stories is a really great way to trigger the imagination. And the other thing that I do a lot of too, and I encourage my students to do a lot of, is listen and try to write radio plays. Because radio plays are a very unique, I write a lot of radio plays, they're a very unique form of theatre in many ways. It's not actually theatre, but it's a collaboration of imagination with your audience. And I think that we forget sometimes that all of our senses can be sparked in a theatrical setting, and radio really sort of makes you listen in a new way and triggers the imagination in a fun way. So I recommend doing that too. BBC has tons of stuff online.
So interesting. Have you ever heard of the Imagined Theaters series? Do you know about that?
No.
I'm trying to remember who does it. His name is Daniel something. But there's a series online, and I think they collect one every couple of months or so, and publish the top 25 that they like that selection session. And it's just called Imagined Theaters, and it's just write little short pieces, little 10-minute to 30-minute pieces that are technically should be performed on a stage, but it has zero, it does not have to be doable at all. These are things that are purely theater for the imagination.
Oh, I love it. I'm going to look for it. That sounds
Yeah, there's some really cool ones. I remember when my professor at FSU introduced, I was like, oh, I'm going to write one where there's a tree that keeps growing like an orange, and then that orange grows out and it becomes a pear and a different fruit. I was like, I don't care how it's going to be done. It doesn't need to be done.
Yeah, and that's the thing.
Exercise.
If we look at Sarah Rule's work, I love Sarah Rule's work. I always wanted to write like Sarah Rule. I don't write like Sarah Rule, but I wanted to. And she doesn't hold back on her imagination at all, right? She has one play, I think it's called The Misery Play. Gosh, maybe I'm misquoting it. But it's, Melancholy Play, The Melancholy Play.
Yes.
And, it's about a woman who turns into an almond. But it's, there are so many great things that you just think as a director, or even the one she just had, Eurydice, that she just had at Signature.
Yes.
You just think, how are you supposed to do this? Well, who cares? Somebody with imagination will. So just do it, just write it.
Yeah, I remember that same professor showed me Siwa, a play, I think it's Icelandic, but I could be totally wrong about that. But there's a scene where a mother polar bear has to swim down underneath the ice and save its baby polar bear from drowning. And he had us read that play, and then came into class the next day. He goes, how would you stage this? And we just had a whole long discussion about all these different ideas. And I think that sometimes playwrights get really caught up with that in the, I have to think about how this is stageable.
Oh, all the time. And the thing that drives me craziest with some of my students, and I try and break them of this as much as I can, is that they always want to direct on the page. And I get it, as a director, I get it, I really do. But what happens when you do that is that actually you stifle imagination. And actually, if you stop trying to direct it and just say what you want it to be, it doesn't have to be she moves stage left. It can be she sails across the stage, be as poetic as you want in your stage directions. And somebody will figure out what that means. It doesn't have to be literal.
Yeah, absolutely. Do we have any more questions, Camille?
Yes, there's one more in the chat. It says, what do you think are the biggest hurdles facing young theater creatives today?
Money. It's a nightmare out there. I mean, for all creatives, first of all, this is just my tirade. I hate this label of emerging artists because it makes people feel like you have to be a certain age to be emerging, when actually we're always emerging as artists. That is the whole point of being an artist. And if we're not, so you should get rid of that label. The second thing is that money is such an obstacle, because unless you're wealthy or come from a wealthy background, it's very hard to take risks in theater. It's very hard to be in theater. I'm incredibly lucky because I've lived in the same rent-stabilized apartment for 20 years. If I didn't have that situation in New York City, there is no way that I could have stayed in this city as an artist. And so that is a huge obstacle, is how do you have time to write? How do you make enough money to pay your rent? Then you've got the problems of most theaters, as you sort of do different things, a lot of theaters don't want to bring on productions. They may love your play, but they may not want to produce your play unless you have a producer attached already. And that is a huge problem. That should not be the case. Because what happens then is that if you are in circles where you meet producers or circles where you know people with money, you instantly have a leg up on somebody who doesn't. This isn't true across the board. There are lots of playwrights who get produced without that, but so many theaters, especially musical theater, unfortunately. It's very hard for musical theater writers without a producer. The other thing challenge I think at the moment is this world that we're living in. And I'm sorry to bring politics into the room.
I lost a full job because of Trump's defunding of the non-for-profit arts. And a company that was around for 20 years is gone. So.
Yeah, it's atrocious. And now we're seeing things like what's happening at the Kennedy Center happening, where they're basically encouraging theaters not to allow union workers to be on stage. This is a huge problem. And so we are in a place right now where theatre artists are more important than ever and less funded than ever. And so this is why, in my opinion, just my little humble Welsh opinion, this is why we need to get together as artists and create where and when we can, and not get hung up on what looks good, what sounds good, what is it in the right place, is it in the sexy place? Sometimes we need to just put up a milk cart or an apple box, and we just need to put on a play. That's how I started my career, right, with my friends at Rebellious Subjects. We just put things up in parks and what have you, and then we got other jobs. We need to start doing that again with the stories we tell, because let me tell you, these producers, the ones that have their houses, are scared. They're scared of alienating their audiences. They would much prefer, not all, but many of them would prefer to program mediocrity over challenging work because they don't want to alienate a certain subset of the audience. We are surrounded, unfortunately, by sexist and racist and xenophobic people and homophobic people, and they are in our industry. We don't always realize it, but they are in our industry. And so we have to call it out where we see it, and we have to just keep marching on and just put our tent up where we can. Find your people. The best advice I ever heard was at the first Lily Awards that I ever went to. And it was, I think it was Teresa said this, actually. Somebody said this on stage. They said, go to where you're loved. If you keep knocking on the doors of people that don't love you, you're just going to end up outside starving. So go where you are loved and keep building that community. If you're a weirdo, find your fellow weirdos, right? Because otherwise, you're just going to be alone, and that does not help us as artists. Sorry, that's just my little rant.
Yes.
Sorry.
Oh, wow. Thank you so much. No, I agree with every word of that. Cool. Is there anybody else in the audience that has any more questions for? Oh, go ahead, Camille.
Oh no, I just wanted to say thank you. Since we are at 6:30, I don't want to
Oh,
stretch
I didn't even realize. Sorry.
past everyone's time. So I'll invite Jay back on to say a few closing words. And then I believe the Zoom room might stay open if people want to keep chatting. But thank you again, Melissa, and Jordan.
Thank you for having me, all. Thank you. I look forward to continuing to hear about this community. It's very exciting to be introduced to you all. Thank you.
Yes, thank you for joining us, Melissa. This was excellent, and wonderful person, wonderful things that you had to say. I mean, you could just see right there at the end, everyone was like, "Yes, preach truth." So, you definitely spoke to our community very well. So, thank you very much for coming. And thank you, Jordan and Camilla. My Lord, we love you two so much. So we are so glad that you two are part of our community and that you are willing to be here and talk to Melissa and share all of this information with us. So we adore you two very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you to everybody in the community. Thank you for all those of you who come every week. Thank you to those who are here for the first time. We saw a few faces that we haven't seen in a while. So that's the joy about this is, we sort of don't lose touch with anyone because of this. And that's really awesome. As you're talking about community, Melissa, that's entirely what we are. And, I've been with this company myself for 7.5 years. So clearly the community here is worth being a part of. So we hope to see you again for sure. So if anyone wants to be on our mailing lists, I put my email address in here. You can email me there and say that you'd like to be on our mailing list. Believe me, I will not put you on unless you say so. As Bob says every week, we do this for free. This is a service to our community. But if you are so inclined to purchase a ticket, a donation to the community gathering, or just a donation in general, we are more than happy to accept that from you. We are in the middle of our summer donor drive right now. So, we are definitely all about gathering money. So please consider making a donation to TRU. We will put a link in the chat. And yes, we will keep the room open for a bit. If Camilla, Jordan, Melissa, if you all can want to stay and talk to everyone a little bit longer, wonderful. If you got to go, by all means, we won't keep you. But if everybody wants to stay in the room and chat, you are more than welcome to. And until next week, where we will have Janelle Scarborough and Carly Santori, our executive producers for the True Speak filmed play series. They will be here to discuss with some of the artists the process of turning a play into a film. So come join us next week for that. And until then, have a wonderful weekend, everyone.